Chiefs fans, welcome to Chiefs Live, presented by your Midwest Ford dealers. Josh Looney with you live at 1 Arrowhead Drive, and thanks for joining us. If you're watching live here on a Thursday, a new day, we'll be here the rest of the spring and summer to better coordinate with the Chiefs offseason program, bringing you the best content we possibly can each week here on KCChiefs.com. Of course, our daily shows will start up once training camp begins sometime in late July. The Chiefs eligible to report to training camp on July 26th, so it'll be sometime in that neighborhood. So thanks for making the switch from Tuesdays to Thursdays with us. This will be your new day going forward through the rest of the spring and summer months, but we'll stay at noon each and every week here on KCChiefs.com. A lot to get through today in our hour-long show. Voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, will join us momentarily as we talk about all things Chiefs, but extensively the rookie minicamp that's upcoming this week, and where the Chiefs will have 38 players in town. You're going to have 15 undrafted players. You're going to have 8 drafted players. You're going to have 10 tryout players, and you're going to have a number of veteran players trying out for this team, as well as rookies trying out for this team. We'll get into the names and the who's who of who will be here in just a few. But let's start off with the news of the week. Jamaal Charles talking about his health, declaring himself 80% healthy going into 2012.
Do you feel like you're 80% now? Would the doctor put that number as more than that? Or are you just in your...
In my mind, you know what I'm saying, and Dr. Andrews, he probably say, you can go ahead and go. But I think in my mind, if I can say I'm ahead of schedule, and I can still my mind and let my body do whatever it wants. But in my mind, I feel like I never had the surgery. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel normal. I feel like I can do everything everybody else can do. I can do it even better.
Yeah, it's tough to be patient. I understand, but that's your game, your wheels. I mean, you got to make sure it's 100%, don't you?
Yeah, I got to make sure I'm hungry. I want it this year. I'm in love with it. I got the passion for it. It's just like I can be patient. You know what I'm saying? I just can't wait. I can't wait to play football. I can't wait to bring stuff back to this community and show them how much that we can win. And I feel like this is a year for us that we can go all the way. And I'm saying it because I know I can feel it in me that I can bring a lot to the team this year, being bigger and stronger, and might be even faster. So that I can wait a while, or you know what I'm saying, it's in my mind that I want to get back out there because I want to see where I'm at, but I feel like I'm already there already, so I can just wait. Just like that year I had my shoulder surgery, I waited the training camp to go back to, so I didn't do nothing really doing OTAs or minicamp.
Voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, joins us on set here on Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers. Mitch, that's just a clip of what Jamaal had to say this week, and what he said in the long run got a lot of Chiefs fans pumped up about his eagerness to play, his how defenses will feel his pain, talked about feeling sick for missing all of last season. I asked you about his impact this year, and what kind of impact do you think Jamaal will make, and really how do you think the Chiefs manage his workload going forward once the season begins?
I'm going to take your last question first, because I think one of the concerns here is he's like a thoroughbred in the paddock. I mean, I think he's just itching and ready to go, and that's been his nature ever since he came here from the University of Texas. Tough guy, loves to play, and wants to play full speed right away. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for Romeo and Brian Daboll and the rest of the crew of how to handle it from the get-go. Don't do too much too soon, but hit the ground running when you play Atlanta in that opening game. Now let's talk about his impact. Josh, I think he's probably the most underrated player right now in the National Football League, and the reason is statistically, and some know this, but I don't think nationally it gets enough pub, the fact that he has now had 500 carries. I believe he's at 499 or 498, and at 6 yards a carry, that's the best in the history of the National Football League. And you got a database of 500 carries. This isn't 100 carries. And I don't think that's been done by anybody that has at least 500 carries in the National Football League. Going back to Jimmy Brown, he was right under 6 after 500 carries. So to me, it's huge. And if you look at the 10 wins Kansas City had in the AFC West Championship year of 2010, in 6 of those 10 games, he had an explosive play of at least 25 yards or more. In the three of the 4 wins in 2009, he had the kickoff return against Pittsburgh, a 44-yard run on the road against the Oakland Raiders, and then the 259-yard game against the Denver Broncos. it pretty much meshes up. If the Chiefs have a chance of winning, Jamaal Charles in most of those games will have an explosive play, whether it's special teams catching a pass or running it.
The one thing to note about Jamaal, his toughness to me seems to go underrated around most. And his durability has always been a concern with people. When you look back, dating prior to last season, he had missed one game in his first 3 seasons in the NFL. It was when Todd Haley made him a healthy scratch in the season opener in 2009 against the Oakland Raiders.
Might have cost them the game.
It might have cost him a game. At the same time, Jamaal also points to that game as motivation for him. Todd was trying to get his attention to be a more complete back, get in his playbook more, do the pass blocking things more. And remember, the Chiefs had Larry Johnson, who was coming back up, and we didn't know that he was kind of on the tail end of his career. They thought he still had something left. He was still the starter. So that was kind of the time to make an impact on who you thought your future was going to be. And that was, Todd did that with a number of players, and he did that with Jamaal in the
But I remember that game. Let me just, because that's a flashback moment. Because we're in the booth, I'm getting ready to go, and it's right before the inactives are announced. So I turn around, and Jamal's standing there. And I'm like, what are you doing standing here? And he goes, I'm not going to play today. And I remember getting like really weak-kneed thinking, what's going on?
But the point of it, Mitch, is he gets labeled, and I think unfairly, as a guy who's possibly prone to injury because he's just got a smaller stature, because the Chiefs have been so cautious in limiting his touches, especially when Thomas Jones first came here in 2010, and there was the big debate of, is Jamaal getting enough carries? Why don't they give him the football more? And, well, he's a smaller back. So he kind of gets labeled in there, but until he had the freak knee injury last year, this is a guy who played through a shoulder surgery, would take himself out in the middle of those games in 2009 when he was in that second half of that season, pop his shoulder back in on the sidelines, run back out, and wait to get off-season shoulder surgery in the off-season so he could keep playing. This is a guy who's very tough and has only missed time in the NFL because of a freak injury, hitting that orange pylon thing, running into Roar, the Lions mascot. However it happened, it's a freak injury. It wasn't something that, hey, you got cracked and all of a sudden you got a concussion, or you had your shoulder needs surgery, or your knee collapsed because of a hit you took.
It concerns me that you actually know the Lions mascot's first name.
I think it's Rory. How could you forget after? I think you actually said that on air. You're like, because it looked, when it was live, we saw it looked like he was injured from hitting Rory because he fell at his feet.
I got hit the mascot. You can't make this up. He is one of the toughest football players in this whole franchise. Game, set, match. And when I saw it, dealing with all those injuries that people didn't know he dealt with, and you mentioned the shoulder injury, he covered kicks in 2009. You remember this? He's on kickoff coverage, and he went running down like he was Terrence Copper or Javon Belcher or something covering a kick. That's when he'll do anything. If Romeo Crennel won't do this, but if you ask him to cover kicks in week 1 against Atlanta, he'd be out there. This guy is tough, and he's very team-minded. Because if the other thing that bugs me, they say he's not tough or injury-prone, is they say he's somewhat selfish. Now, the only selfish ones are the ones who have him on their fantasy football team that want to have him carry the ball every time. You ask me how they're going to use him. He's averaged about 15 carries a game throughout his career, which to me is about right. If you get in the 15 to 19 range, depending on the opponent, now that's rushes, that's not touches, because he could get another 3 to 5 passes. But enter Peyton Hillis here, enter Cyrus Gray potentially, in the fact that he's not having to carry it, because anytime you get over that 20 mark and you do it over a couple of weeks, that's when you kind of get into the danger zone. But with Peyton Hillis here, potentially Cyrus Gray being involved in the mix, I think it's a potentially perfect recipe for keeping Jamaal at his best.
Jamaal made the headlines of the veterans this week and made lots of sound clips and pumped up a lot of Chiefs fans. But the story of the week is what's about to happen Friday through Sunday here at One Arrowhead Drive. Rookie minicamp. You can wear the helmets. The rookies will be there wearing helmets. They'll be going offense versus defense. It'll be really everything except for full contact. The coaches will be out there. You'll have all of the draft class except for Jeff Allen will get to miss Saturday's practice to go walk at graduation in Illinois. So good for him. Hats off to Jeff. And also Tim Bier, the tight end out of Kansas, will miss Sunday's practice to walk at his graduation ceremony at the University of Kansas. Class act for Romeo Crennel to give those guys off. They're going to have hundreds of practices ahead of them, only one graduation. It's a special time for them, and Romeo Crennel knows that. Gave those two guys their day off to spend a special day with their families. But I look at this roster, Mitch, and you look at the tryout players that are in here that are going to come in this week, and there's 10 tryout guys, And there's 7 roster spots still available that are open right now for the Kansas City Chiefs. There's 83-player roster. You can carry 90 men before you would have to start cutting one. And a couple guys that catch attention. David Legree of Hampton will be the only quarterback in camp this week. And actually, there were some false reports about 2 weeks ago that he signed a free agent deal with the Chiefs. He must have just been invited to camp. So he's going to come, but he'll get a long look, Mitch, because he's going to take every single snap of this rookie minicamp. But names that the Chiefs fans may know. An interesting one, a guy trying out here, a former 4th-round pick of the Browns, Martin Rucker, the tight end out of University of Missouri, a stud at the University of Missouri. Hasn't quite worked out for him in the NFL. He will be here on a tryout basis this week, and I'd like your thoughts on Martin Rucker from your knowledge of Big 12 and really the kind of what he brings to the table.
Well, when I mentioned explosiveness with Jamal Charles, and it's in a different way, but a guy that made explosive plays at Missouri. Now, they had a great offense. There was great guys around him, great quarterback, but there's power and explosion in this guy, and I really thought that he would have a better NFL career up to this point than he has had. I think it's a matter of staying healthy and getting in the right system and that sort of thing. But he does become part of the intrigue. Everybody will look at all of the draft picks for sure. And I'm curious of seeing all these guys. I'm curious to see Devon Wiley and Cyrus Gray. I really want to see those guys, and Hemingway, quite honestly, the kid from Michigan. But Rucker will be a story just because he's been so popular here, and who knows? I mean, this is kind of how you do this. Sometimes you find a guy that's either been cast aside or gets lost in the shuffle, so to speak, and ends up helping a team.
Well, what's interesting about Rucker as well, the Chiefs had Dallas Clark in for a visit last week, so they're still kind of looking for the right fit if they bring in a guy to be that 3rd tight end. You've got Boss, you have Moyaki, then you have Jake O'Connell, and also I'm forgetting Steve Maneri. Steve Maneri also right now, so there is room to add an extra guy for competition. Rucker's an intriguing name. You're right, it will be a storyline this weekend at camp from his area ties. And also the athleticism he brings. Another guy who'll be here and on a tryout has a ton of NFL experience, actually a former 4th-round draft pick of Romeo Crennel with the Browns in 2006. Leon Williams, a linebacker, has about 50-some games of NFL experience, 12 starts to his name, has played with the Browns, has played with, I believe, the Cowboys as recently as 2010, goes 6'4", 237. Mitch, I don't know a ton about this guy and his game. I do know he brings a lot of experience. I do know he has previous experience with Romeo Crennel. But also, Mitch, he's at a position of need, probably the biggest position of need for the Chiefs in finding a reserve as inside linebacker.
Well, and we've talked about it the times we've been on over the last couple of months, is that does become a position that gets circled that we thought might have been addressed in the draft when we're talking all the talk about Luke Kuechly. So, yeah, now, remember back in the lockout, let's go back a year ago at this time, there was concern or at least an observation that there would be guys that would get kind of lost in the shuffle with the lockout, in the fact that they just kind of got thrown off the database. And then when the lockout was lifted, everything was a mad scramble at camp. The 60 guys were there, then you add the 30, and so Leon might be a personification of a guy that basically got hurt by the lockout and the fact that he really wasn't on the radar last summer. And once the season started, people had kind of put their plans in place. And so maybe he gets another start here. So, yeah, he's at least got some experience. It'll be interesting to watch him this weekend. We didn't mention about Rucker. He's from St. Joe.
Right. It'd be great.
And his brother played at Nebraska. And, of course, he's got, I think he went to Benton. So if that's not right, we're all going to get tweeted here, crashing the server. But that'll be, interesting, too, because people up there love the Ruckers.
Later on this afternoon, I'll have posted on KCChiefs.com the full, kind of spiel that they'll go through at rookie minicamp, what the guys will go through, the rules that they can and can't do, and also the entire roster of the guys who will be participating in rookie minicamp this weekend. But Rucker and Williams, two of the most noteworthy tryout names that will be here.
Yeah, but let's say this about rookie minicamp. This is the NFL's version of taking the middle school kids when they take them over to the high school. Orientation, yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
High school orientation.
Or kind of kindergarten roundup, You get them in there and you get your toe in the water and it's not real. I mean, some rookies come out of this weekend going, okay, well, I handled that okay. What's so tough? Well, it gets a little tougher. However, it's a little more than that in the fact that they get the playbook thrown at them. It's like, all right, now you're here. Here's what's required of you. And not just like on the field, but off the field stuff as well. I mean, this is kind of a comprehensive weekend for them. But yeah, this is the first day of swimming lessons.
Big week, so much to cover. We've got some exclusive interviews we have with our top 4 draft picks and some of the beat writers that covered him, Mitch, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But I don't want to forget about a guy who a lot of people said, who, when the Chiefs signed him, Ropati Pitua. Let's see, I got the pronunciation. Ropati
Pitua or something.
Pitotua is how you pronounce the last name. P-I-T-O-E.
I had it down. We played him in the Jets.
Pitotua.
I worked on this yesterday. I was driving back from Lincoln.
We'll ace the pronunciation once he gets on the field, Mitch. But this is a guy,
human.
A lot of people said, who, when the Chiefs signed him? And I wrote an article the other night on it. This guy is going to have a lot of opportunity to make this team.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be one of those Sean Smith signings, one of those Amon Gordon signings, a guy who doesn't get a ton of fanfare when he signs, but ends up with the potential to play a big role. The Chiefs right now have depth at defensive end, but their depth is interesting, Mitch. It's guys like Alan Bailey. Well, Alan Bailey's more of that Wallace Gilberry third down sub-package guy, bring him in the nickel situation. You've got guys like Brandon Bear. Well, the Chiefs like him, but he has no NFL experience. He took a red shirt last year. What they really are missing is what Sean Smith did in 2010 when Tyson Jackson went down with the knee injury on the season opener. Smith goes on and starts 10 games in that 5-tech as the base defensive end across from Dorsey. When they went in passing down, Smith went out, Gilberry came in, Dorsey would shift down. But that true 5-tech defensive end, who is that going to be next year? There's going to be a lot of competition for it, and this guy I think is going to be right in the middle of that competition.
Yeah, and if he makes a play, and Poe's out there, is it Roe and Poe?
Rowan Poe.
Okay. The guy's a gigantic human.
6'8".
And big guy, undrafted when he came out of Washington State. When the Jets picked him up, there was a lot of interest in the guy. From the standpoint of you just look at the measurables of him, he could be a Sean Smith plus. This could be a bigger deal than Sean Smith or Wallace Gilberry or Amon Gordon in the fact that you mentioned the position that he plays. And if he can become established, or it becomes a tag team match where now all of a sudden you've got not only depth there, but you stay fresh at that position because let's be honest, Tyson Jackson and help me out here.
Glenn Dorsey?
Yeah, Glenn Dorsey. We're both blanking
that
out here.
big guy.
Glenn Dorsey, yeah, the guy that signed the first round.
I'm forgetting Stephen Airy.
I'm forgetting Glenn Dorsey. But the fact is, those guys have played a gazillion snaps. Depending on the opponent and the scheme, they have played an abnormal number of snaps over the last couple of years. And so if Rowe can come in and at the very least become close to a starter or an impact player at that spot, it is a huge pickup for this team in more than just his physical stature.
Yeah, one of our bigger post-draft needs we talked about just a few weeks ago on KCChiefs.com and this show right here. Let's get to some of our interviews we have. Dontari Poe, a man who covered him for the Memphis Commercial Appeal. Paul Stuckenborg, he covers everything there is to do about Memphis athletics, including the football program there. And he gives us a little bit of insight of some of the things we haven't heard from Dontari. How's the guy in the locker room? What's he like to cover as a media person? More personality. Let's go to Paul and hear what he had to say. Thanks for joining us on Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers. We take a look at Dontari Poe, the Chiefs' first-round draft pick out of the University of Memphis. And to help us learn more about Poe is Phil Stuckenborg of the Commercial Appeal, covers Memphis football and knows everything there is to know about the Memphis Tigers. Phil, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, glad to be with you.
Phil, we've heard of Dontari's upbringing and his family life and what was highlighted in the ESPN story and kind of the tough neighborhood he grew up in. Can you give us a setting of just where exactly he comes from in the Memphis community?
He comes from
Dontari Poe was prepared to make a name for himself at this year's NFL.
It's more of a midtown part of Memphis, near a school called Wooddale. And he's been someone, and if you've read or followed that piece on ESPN, he came from a rough upbringing, but because of his family, especially his mom, he was able to kind of rise above it, and really is a wonderful human being.
Yeah, Phil, we heard he checked out squeaky clean. The Chiefs would say that was the least of their concerns. What was the past that he had and the troubles he had growing up around that area. They said just an amazing person, as good as a person as you'll meet is what we heard from the Chiefs front office. What can you tell us about Dontari Poe, the person, from covering him in his 3 seasons at Memphis?
It's funny, really soft-spoken, player. Someone that in some ways would kind of belie the position, but he was probably as quiet and thoughtful a teammate as anyone had there. And that was from day one. I remember seeing him on a couple of recruiting trips and just always, one of those yes sir, no sir kind of guys. And I think he instantly became a favorite of the coaches and of his teammates.
The Tigers went 5-31 during Dontari's 3 seasons there. How did he handle losing, from the best you could tell, from a media standpoint, and in the locker room after game when you'd go up to him after they'd suffered another loss?
In our business, you have guys that are called go-to guys. Win or lose, especially lose, someone you can go to and know you're going to get a pretty thoughtful answer, and someone who's not going to be affected by what happened in the game in terms of how he deals with media. Ontario is one of those guys, and there are not many of those kind of guys that are pretty even win or lose.
Yeah, Phil, I covered the Chiefs for a 3-year period. They won 10 total games, so I know exactly what you mean on your go-to guys in the locker room, and sometimes it's tough to form a story. What can you tell us about his improvement as a player? We've all seen the crazy combine numbers. We've heard the criticism of Dontari of maybe the production total not matching what typically would be a top 15 pick in the NFL. How did you see him improve from when he walked into Memphis to when he exited?
What's strange is that here's someone that ended up being the number 11 pick in the draft, and he didn't even make I think he was preseason second team in Conference USA. And it just shows you that a lot of the picks were made on numbers and not on ability. It was only, 33 tackles and 1 sack last year, but consistently, if you talk to defensive coordinator Mike DuBose, former Alabama head coach, he was the one who kept telling me time and time again, this guy has the potential to be the best I've ever coached at this position. And that's someone who's been through some incredible run of talent when he was at Alabama, as a player, as a coach, as a head coach. And, I just remember thinking, the numbers aren't there, but the defense Memphis played kind of funneled everyone to his linebackers. And so what they did for him, maybe kept his numbers down. But Mike was very, very high on him from the beginning.
Do you think he was hamstrung then by that scheme that Memphis played? Obviously, Conference USA has a lot of teams that will spread the ball around, but when we heard Romeo Crennel talk about Dontari, he said, this is a guy that he's just going to play nose here, and we may have him be a 3-down player in a 3 technique when they go to their base or their sub-package sets outside of the base. He also said, though, that Dontari was playing kind of everywhere on the Memphis defensive front. It was hard for him to hone in on one position. Did you notice that he seemed to be all over the defensive line doing different things during his time with the Tigers?
He was, and I'll tell you what stands out is when he was a freshman for his first season in the camp in August. Their first look at him, they could not keep him out of the offensive backfield. I mean, the coaches were laughing, like, what do we do? This freshman coming in with, incredible speed and quickness. That stood out to me. That I thought this guy was going to set all kind of statistical numbers and break records just because of how quick he was. As quick as anyone you'd ever seen. But they did move him around, and again, he went through 4 defensive coordinators too, so I think that kind of played into him maybe not putting up the numbers had he had one guy who knew what he could do from the outset.
From watching him as he goes to the NFL game, what do you think he needs to improve upon? What were some of the holes in Dontari's game? We know he's got the brute strength. We know he has the speed and all the physical tools, but from his game and what you were able to see, where does he need to improve the most to be successful at the NFL level?
probably just be his understanding of one position. You know, I think he'll get. I think with the consistent coaching, he'll probably get. I think he'll step up and be a much better player at the NFL level. It was hard. I'll just go back to again going through all the coordinators he did. I just think that did just kind of held him back from really being maybe like a first-team defensive player of the year kind of guy in Conference USA. And then, you know, the team here, of course, struggled, as you said earlier, as much as they did, and they didn't help either.
Phil, you know Memphis football is as good as anyone, and that goes with seeing Dontari Poe play. I guess my final question for you would be to do what everybody else is doing, and that's predict his success at the NFL level. I know it's a tough thing to do, but he is kind of the most debated prospect at the first round. Everyone labels him the boomer bust guy. He could be a 10-year Pro Bowler at the boom and be the heart of a solid defense for years to come, or teams may and analysts may say he's going to be the bust of the first round. Where do you think he fits in for his future in the NFL?
I like guys who have incredible work ethic, and he's had that from the start. Also have a lot to play for. I mean, he's you probably read the stuff and how much his mom and family means to him. He's got a brother, you know, Robert, who's in jail now, and he's trying to play for his family. He's got the speed of a linebacker. I mean, there's all these components working that give you such a strong foundation, a strong base, and just knowing that he's never going to have a character issue. I just think all that bodes well for the Chiefs and for making the pick the way they did.
Friday morning, Dontari Poe will go into the Chiefs equipment room, Mitch. He'll be fitted for his helmet. He'll get I don't know if Romeo Crennel will do it. He may or may not get the logo if they go with the red helmets or the ones without the logo, but he will wear Chiefs apparel for the first time. He has not been, like many other teams that have paraded their rookies around after the draft, he has not been in Kansas City in this building yet. This is his first time here. He will go through practice just like all these other guys. So I ask you, when you're watching practice this weekend, Mitch, what is something in this non-contact environment that a big man that plays nose tackle can do to impress you as a good first impression?
I would say tempo. I think it starts right away for Dontari. As soon as he walks in the building, on the field and off the field, because he's trying to prove everybody wrong. I would say to be combine-ish, if you will, in the fact just on the field and off the field, be aware, be attentive, be into it, and just kind of set a tempo, not only for himself, but maybe for the rest of the rookie class. Because quite honestly, the rest of these guys always look at the number one pick and like, that's the number one pick. I mean, that's where you start and go down the order. So I think it's a big weekend for him. Now, he's not going to win any games. He's not going to make Pro Bowl this week, but I think to prove all of his detractors wrong, I think it starts this weekend.
You know what else, and this is silly, and it has nothing to do with how he'll be a player, but you know what I think he needs to do this week, Mitch? More than really anything, is win the media game. And I say that as there are still people on the sidelines that watch him that are wondering about this pick. And the media is going to meet him in person for the first time this weekend as well. If he can win the media game, that's going to help him as he's going to have critics as a number one pick, but I just think if he can make a positive first impression, yes, with his motor, with his tempo, but also in front of the cameras, a smiling guy, a happy guy, I think that's going to help him in the early goings with people accepting him and giving him a chance to come in and contribute and be a player for the Chiefs.
Well, I would agree with that to some extent, but that's a short wick. If you do that, I think this weekend's fine. But if the whole motor tempo thing doesn't come into play, that wick is gone. And they're going to say, well, see, why did they take him? And we won't know till St. Joe, quite honestly, when things get rolling really good. But I just think for him, in the building, with his compadres, the rest of the rookies in this class, with the coaching staff, with the front office, just send a message internally that you chose the right guy.
We talked to Bob Osmondson, who covers Illinois football, and he knows Jeff Allen very well. Spoke very highly of Jeff Allen, Mitch, and this is a guy that would be interesting to watch this weekend and where they put him. Is it going to be at tackle? Is it going to be guard? Sit on that, salivate on that. Let's hear from Bob on what he knows about Jeff Allen. It's rookie minicamp week here on Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers. And to help us break down the Chiefs' second-round draft pick, Jeff Allen out of Illinois, is Bob Asmussen of the Champaign News-Gazette. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Oh, anytime.
You know, we know a little bit about Jeff already as far as what he's going to play in Kansas City and what he did for the Illini, but for you covering Jeff for 4 years, what can you tell us about Jeff Allen, the person?
He's really, and I've covered the team for a long, long time, he's really one of the better kids I've gotten to deal with. Just from a personality standpoint, once you get to know him, you realize he's a gregarious kid. He's a very smart kid, first of all. A great personality and fun to talk to, very respectful. He's a guy that really, from the second I met him, I remember thinking, wow, this is going to be easy. And I just hope I hope he'd be a good player. You get those guys sometimes, you're praying that they end up being as good as they are as talkers. So he was really good, always good to comment, but also pretty insightful. And I think a lot of offensive linemen are like that. They are the brains of the operation oftentimes, and I think he definitely fits that mold.
And Bobby seems to fit a Scott Pioli lineman mold, and a lot of Chiefs fans thought the Chiefs were going to go after a guard and David DeCastro out of Stanford in the first round. They went with Jeff instead in the second, who many scouting services had ranked as the second best guard prospect in this year's draft, behind DeCastro, even though he played tackle at Illinois. As far as a player, what can you tell us about how you saw an improvement from him from his freshman year to his senior year at Illinois?
Well, I don't know how much he went into it with you, how much Jeff did, but he came here as a mid-year guy. He came in January. He graduated from high school early, but he was gigantic, and not in a good way. He weighed probably 370. They never really told us what he weighed, but it was a lot. And by the time the fall rolled around, he had shed like 50 or 60 pounds and turned himself into a player. And so give Illinois a lot of credit for getting together with him and say, listen, bud, you got to stop eating like you're eating and you got to start working out. And he did. So I think a work ethic thing, you got to give him a ton of credit for losing that weight, for turning himself into a player. And I just saw steady progress every year. I thought as a freshman he kind of got thrown out there. He did a pretty good job handling it for a guy that used to weigh 370. And by the time he was a senior, he was a very consistent and at times dominant force in the Big Ten. So yeah, I think he's definitely a guy that worked hard, but also a guy with a lot of God-given ability.
How would you compare him to John Asamoah, a guy who's starting at right guard for the Chiefs and could potentially have an Illinois sandwich there if Jeff Allen's able to win the left guard job this spring and summer? You could possibly have Asamoah and Allen starting on the left and right guard for the Chiefs. How does he compare physically and also as a player to maybe John Asamoah?
Well, it's really interesting because they are two of my favorite people ever. And John, very much like Jeff, is humble, and he's a guy that works for everything he got. John was a very low-level recruit at Illinois, maybe a 2-star or 1-star, whatever. He always liked to joke about it. But he sure turned himself into a player. And, yeah, I think Jeff and him have a lot of similarities from a work ethic. And ability-wise, John was always projected as that inside guy. I think Jeff saw himself as a tackle, but then he will do whatever it takes to get on the field. So yeah, I think it'd be pretty cool to have two Illinois guys there playing a guard, and certainly John, it sounds like he's got off to a great start in his career, and Jeff, it sounds like has a great chance to do that too.
If Jeff doesn't end up cracking the starting lineup, which he won't at tackle unless there's an injury, the Chiefs have Brandon Albert and Eric Winston. If he doesn't get that starting guard spot, he could possibly be the Chiefs' #1 backup at both tackle positions and both guard positions. One of the things the Chiefs really said they liked about him was he played right and left tackle for the Illini, but really he was only their left tackle. The Illini kind of have that old school strong and weak side thing going on with their offensive line. What can you tell us about the scheme they played and why he was sometimes on the right side even though he was a left tackle?
Yeah, they basically jumped the guys depending on which way they were going, or where the tight end was, or whatever direction they wanted to go. So yes, at times Jeff would be a right tackle, even though predominantly he was a left side guy. And here's a great film to look at if you want to see a real good Jeff Allen game, and that is the 2010 Illinois Northwestern game at Wrigley Field. Mikel LaShore ran for 330 yards in that game, and I promise most of those were behind Jeff Allen. He went that direction often, and you see Jeff just kicking Northwestern guy out after Northwestern guy, and so he's a guy that could. I agree with the versatility part about him. I think honestly, center's probably the only position he is a real comfortable playing, and I'll bet if you told him to play center, he'd be ready in a couple of weeks. So he's a guy, and I'll tell you, he would love to go out and catch a pass or two. So he's a guy that craves that deal, but I don't know if they'll do that with him. But let him play tight end a play or two, but he'll do anything you ask him to do. And again, I think it goes all back to his work ethic and the kind of person he is, the fact that he puts the team ahead of himself. And I think you saw that this last year. Honestly, I was a little surprised he went as high as he did, but when I started thinking about it, I said, if I met him and I was a scout or a coach or general manager, I'd draft him. And just based on personality alone, then you see him on film and he's good. So, yeah, I think he'll do whatever they ask him to do.
Was that Northwestern Illinois game at Wrigley, was that the one where they had to go in one direction the whole game because it was cut off in the end zone, or is that a different one I'm thinking about?
No, that's the same game. They ran one direction, and Jeff Allen kept knocking people over. And Mikel LaShore kept running. That was nobody at Illinois ever had a 330-yard rushing game. So that was so basically Jeff helped. He helped make some money for Mikel LaShore and helped make some money for some other guys too. So with his good work. But yeah, he was dominant in that game, and I think partly because the team struggled last year. I think he missed out on some maybe some all-conference recognition and some stuff that he probably should have gotten based on the way he played. I think he was probably the most consistent lineman, but didn't get a lot of credit because they struggled so bad in the second half of the season.
47 consecutive starts for Jeff Allen at Illinois. What does that say to you about his durability?
Well, if you look at the top of that list of most consecutive starts at Illinois, one guy up there is him, and it's a solid list of guys that all played in the NFL. And I think again, he turned himself into a player as a freshman, and then just kept getting better every year, and valued the work ethic that he needed, and also realized getting in the weight room was critical, eating right was critical. So yeah, I think it goes. And the other thing is, it means you didn't get hurt. And it means you took care of your body, and you were, because football is a pretty tough game now, but it really shows how well he was able to maintain his stamina and maintain all the things you needed to play that many games. And he was a very effective player at Illinois, and I hope he has a long career in the NFL.
Chiefs fans seem very excited about Jeff Allen coming in here, mainly because the Chiefs had offensive line depth issues all over the line. We've heard a lot of great things about him. What's something that maybe considered a weakness? What was something you saw him struggle with while he was at Illinois?
Well, I think like any guy, when they're not with a dominant bunch of teammates, I think maybe sometimes you struggle consistency-wise, but I don't think that was a big issue for him. I think maybe once in a while he didn't have he might, I don't want to say took a playoff, because I don't think that ever happened, but I think maybe a play or two he might have made a mistake. He had more penalties maybe this year than he would have liked as well. More holding penalties, more false starts, that kind of stuff bugged him, but I think a lot of that was the issues they had overall on the line. And I will tell you, in large part because they didn't have a great running back behind them, but I don't think the offensive line in Illinois was as good this last year as it was the year before, and part of that was missing players. They had some terrific players that weren't on the team anymore, but I think that Jeff struggled with that a little bit. I'm sure he got frustrated, but he handled it pretty well, because you wouldn't be able to tell from him at the end of the season how upset he had to be on the inside. But I think consistency a little bit.
Bob Asmussen covers the Fighting Illini for the Champaign News-Gazette. Bob, I'll leave you with one more. If Jeff Allen is to become a starter and be successful in the NFL for the long haul, what's one trait that he has that makes you think that could be a possibility?
Oh, again, I'll go back to work ethic and personality with him. He is going to not leave any stone unturned. So if the coaches say, hey, Jeff, you need to work on this, I promise he'll be working on that, whatever it is. If they say your linement's messed up or your hand placement or anything they tell him to do, he's a quick study. And I think that's what really helps. He's a bright kid. You'll get to meet him and get to know him, and you realize there's something in the water with the offensive lineman here at Illinois, because David Deal turned himself into a great NFL player from here without a whole lot of recognition. And guy after guy seems to be going, and John Asamoah is another great example. So I think that Jeff is in that line of recent Illinois linemen who have that great work ethic, a lot of pride in what they do, and then also a quick study type guy who can learn on the fly, and if you tell him to do something, he'll do it. You tell him once, and it's in.
The Chiefs certainly hope there is something in the water. They spend draft picks 2 and 3 years on Illinois linemen. Bob, thanks a bunch for helping us get to know Jeff Allen a little bit more.
Anytime, thanks.
Jeff Allen's an interesting guy, Mitch, and how he's going to fit in with this team. And I think this is a bigger picture, not for this weekend, but overall, some of the criticism you hear about the Chiefs' second-round pick, and really their third-round pick as well, is, well, these picks aren't for 2012. These picks are for the future. Can Jeff Allen, in your opinion, not just contribute this season, but compete for a starting job and possibly be a starter this year?
Yeah, and he's talking to Nathan Scheelhaus, the former Rockhurst quarterback. One of the things that's irritated me about the Jeff Allen pick and the criticism of it is the fact that they're going, well, what a wasted pick at number 2. This is a 2013 pick. You're taking at number 2. And I would argue, no, this is a 2012 pick because I think he'll challenge at guard. He does give you potential tackle backup because he's played both the left and right side. That's been well documented. They played the old style strong and weak system. And I think he'll challenge to be a starting guard. And even if he does get to be a guard, people go, what about, you got Lilj and you got Asamoah? Okay, fine. Yeah, but you wanted competition. And if he beats out of Ryan Lilja, then Ryan becomes your veteran backup. I think it's a 2012 pick all the way. I think Jeff Allen's going to see the field a lot this year, whether it's a starter or in a reserve role, probably as a guard, but even some at tackle. Love the pick, and it's all about this season, not just the future years.
He's the guy when we go to training camp, Mitch, and you and I walk around and kind of team up and look at things and where guys are playing and tally snaps and all that. And sometimes I'll take the defense, sometimes you'll take the offense. This guy will be at the top of our list of where is he lining up?
Where's he at today?
Is he, because he has a possibility if he doesn't win a starting job. Let's say that the starting lineup of the offensive line stays status quo as it would be today. So left to right, you're going Brandon Albert, Ryan Lilja, Rodney Hudson, John Asamoah, Eric Winston. Let's say that is your starting 5 across. We don't know how David Mims is going to take his second year leap if he's still a project. Donald Stevenson, the Chiefs like him, but that probably is more of a 2013 type of pick. Even Scott Pioli said he's probably the furthest away of those early draft picks from playing. So if the Chiefs don't sign another veteran that can be a swing tackle, this could possibly be your number 1 backup at both guards and at both tackle positions. So I'll be interested to see how much repetition they give him on the outside as well as on the inside.
Well, and it's one of those, as we watch every session at camp, that it's like session 9, and he's been repping, and everybody starts writing and talking about, he's the left guard, he's the left guard, he's the left guard. Whoop, in session 9, all of a sudden you see him repping an O-line, D-line as a left tackle. And I think it'll be an interesting, this summer is going to be good for these guys too. Now I think it's these mini camps and like this weekend for the rookies, it's more so for the skill guys. The offensive linemen, of course, get established and doing some things. Camps when it really fires up for those guys. But I think in the same case with Poe setting a pattern, a trend, and a way of doing business, it's the same thing for Jeff. I just think he's got a chance to be a linchpin for this franchise for a long time, and might as well get it started this weekend. But at camp, when the pads go on and you get those going O-line, D-line full speed, is when he'll be very interesting to watch. But I'm just going to say this pick was about this year.
Our storyboard for Chiefs Live took a little bit of a scramble about 30 minutes before we went live because, as we talked about Martin Rucker, about Leon Williams, we got the roster for this weekend finalized at about 11:30 this morning, so we wanted to talk about some of those guys. So we're stretched for time, so we're actually going to skip our interview about Donald Stevenson. We will post it for all of you in an archive format as an overdrive, so you'll still get to see it on KCChiefs.com. But I want to skip, since we just look at a lineman mention, skip over to Devin Wiley also so we can get some highlights and some touchdown scores here on this show. We talked to Paul Leffler, the voice of the Fresno State Bulldogs, about Devin, and he had some interesting things to say. Let's hear what Paul had to say first about Devin, and then I know he's a guy that you're excited to talk a lot about. Chiefs rookie minicamp continues here on Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers. Breaking down Chiefs' 4th-round draft pick, Devin Wiley, the wide receiver out of Fresno State, is voice of the Bulldogs, Paul Leffler. Paul, thanks for joining us, man.
I'm excited to see Devin still wearing red for the Chiefs.
All right, so we'll start with the number then. When I talked to Devin after the draft, he said that he's heard the Wes Welker comparisons every day of his life, and this weekend for minicamp, the Chiefs give him number 83. I guess it's meant to be that he gets that number.
I suppose so. I mean, that's just the way it is, and you know, he is very similar to Welker, but I think he's a different player in the same. He's very explosive and very elusive. And when I think of Welker, I just think of how consistent he is, how sure-handed he is. Sure, he's got the speed, but what Wiley has in addition to the speed is the Wiggles. That was his nickname here. They called him Wiggles because he just had an incredible ability to make people miss, to stop on a dime, change direction, and watch a tackler fly past him. And I'm sure the Chiefs are going to get a good taste of that.
Paul, you watched him live throughout his college career, and here in Kansas City, we don't get a lot of Fresno State Bulldog games on television. How fast is he truly? We heard stories of unofficial 4.29. Obviously, he ran in the 4.3s at the combine, but when you're actually watching Devin play live in person, does it just look that he's that much faster than some of the guys he's playing against?
You know, it can at times, and earlier in his career, he was actually faster. You know, before an injury, they clocked him at a 4.25, which was a record, the fastest any Fresno State player had ever run the 40. And then after missing almost that entire year and coming back, he was still fast. He wasn't quite as fast, and I think he's still getting back there. And I think he has the potential to be that fast again. But what we really saw from him again is that short burst of speed, that explosiveness. It was a factor on punt returns. It was a factor offensively, too. He does have good hands. He's got great leaping ability. But that explosive nature and that rare ability that you can't necessarily coach, that not everybody's born with, that ability to move away from a defensive player and just shoot past them is something that really set Devin Wiley apart.
Paul, what's this guy like? He seems like his personality, at least, is already going over well with Chiefs fans. Within an hour of being drafted, it looked like he went to the mall with his family members, posted a tweet of him and his family all in Chiefs gear that he'd probably bought somewhere in Fresno, and it just seemed like a pretty excitable guy. How would you describe him as a person?
You know, he's interesting. He is excitable, and he's explosive on the field, but off the field he's a fairly mellow guy. He's very involved in his Christian faith. He's very musical. He plays the guitar and sings. So around his teammates, he's kind of a magnet. His teammates are really drawn to him. The quarterback here, Derek Carr, was really excited about having a year to play with him after Devin got hurt and had that, fifth-year situation. He really had a lot of friends on the team, very gregarious, but not a showy, in-your-face kind of personality. Fairly reserved, just a real genuine guy who people can identify with and like to rally around. That's how I describe him.
Well, you said he plays the guitar. Is he like acoustic in a coffee shop playing guitar, or is he with the band and the electric guitar and the whole 9 yards?
I think he has a little bit of range. It could go, to both ends of that, but more the acoustic side. And he has, played in a band and done some of that stuff. So maybe he'll come up with some original music there in Kansas City.
Well, he's going to have to compete with some rivals in the locker room. Tamba Lee likes to bust the rap music. Dustin Colquitt, our punter, will counter with country, and LaRon McClain, who's now part of the Chargers, used to play DJ in between all of them. So if he brings the guitar in the locker room, I'm sure he'll have to battle for some sound time. Tell us about Devin and what he did for the Bulldogs in their offense. Was he pretty much exclusively a slot type of player, or where did Pat Hill line him up in that offense?
Well, in Pat Hill's offense is a pro-style offense. He would line up in the slot occasionally. He'd also go out wide. They would use him on reverse. They would use him on a direct handoff, on an end around. They also, one game in particular, where they were having some matchup problems and not a whole lot was working, they pretty much ran the same play over and over again, which is, like a wide receiver screen, and they just swing it out to him along the line of scrimmage near a sideline and let him work some magic. Even if he was going one-on-one or one-on-three, they had that confidence in his ability to make people miss and gain something positive out of. and that was a game. It was against Louisiana Tech, where he ended up with career highs in catches and yards because he was pretty much the only guy who could do anything against that defense that day. But another thing we saw from him, especially early in his career, was a deep ball threat. I mean, with that kind of God-given speed, he was able to get behind defenders. He had a 70-yard touchdown at Wisconsin where he just toasted their secondary. And then what really made him stand out in his final year with the Bulldogs was his work on punt returns. You guys have probably seen the film on the punt return touchdown he had against Nebraska, which was spectacular. And it was kind of funny because you watch Devin Wiley, you know what he's capable of. And then you see these teams, and they're out punting your coverage, and it's just like begging a guy to do something special. And he didn't only have a couple returns for touchdowns. He had several that were 40 or 50 yards and was really a threat to go all the way every time he got it on a punt return. So I don't know when he'll get his first chance to do that in a Chiefs uniform, but when he does, watch out because he can make some magic.
I think he'll definitely get a chance early, especially as a punt return man and as a slot player. The Chiefs have Dexter McCluster as a return man, and Dexter is kind of built in the same way as Wiley. We've seen some electric returns out of Dexter, but we've also seen some fumble issues with him in the return game. Being a smaller guy himself, how was Wiley's ball security as a return man and as a receiver when he got that ball in his hands throughout his college tenure?
You know, for the most part, it was really good, but as anybody else, there are exceptions. And, you know, there's a game that I know still eats at him against Nevada where he made the decision to catch a ball that he should have let bounce into the end zone. He tried to field it on the 1-yard line. It went through his hands, went into the end zone. Nevada got a touchdown out of it, and that was the pivotal play in the game, a game that Nevada won and kind of turned Fresno State season where they didn't even end up going to a bowl. So, you know, I think that in college was the danger for him, that he was so confident in his abilities, that he was so eager to make a play that sometimes he would try to do too much. And that's something that I think after that game he progressed in and didn't do that as much. But there were moments like that. And I think you'll get that with any young player. But the one thing about Devin Wiley, I think you didn't really see him make the same mistake twice. He's a guy that did learn from it. Very cerebral player, very respectful player, and always, I think, had in mind his role on the team as a whole. It's never about Devin Wiley, it's about the team. And to me, that's something the Chiefs will come to really appreciate.
What's your take on his toughness and injury situation? Anytime a smaller player misses an entire season, sometimes people wonder about their durability. I know Wiley, pretty interesting, when he had the stress fracture in his foot, that he actually played a game on it, and it occurred in training camp before he ended up getting diagnosed and taking the medical hardship year. His durability, would it be a concern to you if you're an NFL team, or what do you know about his toughness while at Fresno State?
You know, I think that was the knock on him here, and that's not his fault. Those are just the things that happened to him. And I thought he really put that to bed with the way he performed as a senior. He fought through everything. I mean, he took some monster shots. Anytime you're a return man on a punt return, you're going to take some shots. But one thing that Pat Hill would bring up a lot of times was not just how elusive he was, and Pat's famous quote about that was he could take a shower and not get wet. That's how elusive he is. But that he knew how to take a hit, and that he wouldn't take that many clean hits because he had such body control. So if he saw the guy coming, he could try to fall the right way and avoid that vicious collision. You can't avoid all of them. He did take some shots, but I thought in his senior year he really proved how durable he was. And I think he set out to prove that because of the injuries that had sidetracked him. So I think all that stuff is in the past. Anything can happen to anybody on any given play. But I think he proved with the schedule they played, the kind of season that they had and had to endure, and his ability to be out there every game performing at a high level, I think he put those issues to rest.
Slot receiver has been a long-standing issue for the Chiefs, really, since Scott Pioli and Todd Haley got here, and it's going to continue now with Romeo Crennel as head coach. This is one of the reasons they selected Devin Wiley. The Chiefs have had Kerry Colbert play the slot, even though he had been out of football for nearly 2 years. They've had guys in and out, from Bobby Ingram to Lance Long. to Bobby Wade. They seem to just keep on going through slot receiver after slot receiver and not being able to find a guy to mix in with Steve Breaston and with Dwayne Bowe and now Jonathan Baldwin. And it seems Wiley's going to get an opportunity early in his career to try and win over that slot job as the Chiefs' number 4 guy. You mentioned his ability to run routes and get open in the deep ball, obviously with his speed. But what other routes does he excel in? How would you describe him as a route runner?
I think he's every bit as good as anybody that you'll see. I think the receiver coach, the position coach they had working with him, really made a difference when he came on board, and that would have been the year that Devin got hurt after catching that touchdown in the opener against Cincinnati. So that was 2010 season. That was his first year with that coach, and he had 2 years with that coach who really kind of firmed up their route running. The play that I wanted to see more of that I thought Wiley excelled at was that quick slant. I mean, because he had that ability. If you get him the ball, he's going to accelerate. And he catch the ball, a couple yards from the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden he's just flying past the linebackers. He's into the secondary, and even if they have an angle on him, they're not getting him either. So that's something that I would like to see, that the inside slant or, even a pick play with him where you rub a defender off on the outside and you let him come across the middle. I think he's really good at getting the ball in space and making something happen. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see some of that employed with him. I think he's very versatile. There are even some plays last year where he would line up in the backfield as a fullback or H-back and motion out of that and take a pass or take a pitch and take off. There were a lot of ways that they found to get him the ball, and I'm sure it'll be no different in Kansas City.
Chiefs fans want him on the field in one way or another, whether it's as a return man or a wide receiver. I'll put you on the spot. If you had to pick one or the other, if he was just going to be a return man next year, or if he was just going to be a wide receiver, what do you think Wiley would excel at the most in the NFL?
I would say the return game. I mean, he's an All-American punt returner. He wasn't an All-American receiver, and part of that was the offense and the other receivers they had. But he's so dangerous. I mean, at most of the season, until finally some teams got wise to it and started kicking away from him. But when teams gave him the opportunity, he was burning them every time. I mean, in the first half of the season, I think he had 7 returns of 40 yards or more. It was ridiculous. He is just really hard to find in the open field. And if you're trying to depend on a one-on-one matchup to get him, you're not going to get him. So I think the Chiefs have, Devin Hester's the gold standard, and that's who Devin Wiley compares himself to. And he may spell the first name different, he may look a little different, but he's that kind of explosive in the punt return game, and I think the Chiefs fans are really going to latch onto him in that role if he's given the opportunity.
Devin Wiley, slot receiver. Let's go to a bit of recent history, Mitch. The names. These ring a bell? Bobby Ingram, Bobby Wade, Lance Long, Kevin Curtis, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some others that have come in.
Tucker.
The Chiefs have been searching for a slot receiver, not for 1 season, not for 2 seasons, not for 3, and you can even go back before the Todd Haley, Scott Pioli era of your Bobby Ingrams and your Bobby Wades, and go past that, because even when Dante Hall was kind of out there, but not really out there, this team, and they've just gone through slot receiver after slot receiver. Can this guy finally be someone that sticks, that inside guy? And what do you think about when you think of those names I gave? I mean, Kevin Curtis started for the Chiefs in a playoff game 7 days after he was signed.
I'm excited about this guy, okay? I just want to see what he can do. Because with the speed, you look at the different routes he's run on these highlights. You look at the punt return against Boise. You look at the punt return against Nebraska. Tough, fast. Can he run routes? It looks like he can run very good routes. Looks like he catches it. This is another gear right here when it's like over. But let's just talk about the wide receiver position as a whole. With Jonathan Baldwin, I'm curious to see how Jonathan will be this summer morphing into St. Joe. We all know about Dwayne Bowe's contract situation. Where's that going to go? Not sure. I don't think it's going to get resolved soon. So there becomes, a lot of pressure on the Steve Brestons of the world, on a Devon Wiley. But overall, you have to look at this position from a 53-year perspective. Josh.
53 or not 53?
Let's go. No, we're going all the way back to Chris Burford. We're going all the way back, 53 to 1960 Dallas Texans. If you look at teams that have been in existence for that long, you're going to find, in most cases, if not all, a Hall of Fame wide receiver. Look at our division: Fred Biletnikoff, Tim Brown, Charlie Joyner. For the Kansas City Chiefs, they really have not had that guy since Otis Taylor. It's kind of proven statistically. I think that the Chiefs and the Ravens are the only two teams in the league where a non-wide receiver, there might be a running back in there someplace, where a non-wide receiver leads the category of catches, yards, and receiving touchdowns, because Todd Heap has it for the Ravens and Tony Gonzalez has it for the Chiefs. What am I going with all this? Somebody in this wide receiver core, for the Chiefs to take a jump up to go where we all want them to go, there needs to be not one, but probably 2 or 3 jump up and play at a high level and a consistently high level. And that would include a guy, if Devin Wiley makes this team and he's a slot receiver and giving him 83, give him Wes Walker. I had another guy came up to me and he goes, well, they ought to give him 80 because he's more like Tim Dwight. Remember the old, University of Iowa?
I'd rather him be like
guy.
Wes Welker.
Yeah, me too.
Tim Dwight personally.
I'll take Tim Dwight for a while. But the point is, the position, it just doesn't stack up very well when you look at it from a historical standpoint of providing winning, consistent football. And so I'm excited about this. Hopefully Breston's knee is going to be fine and he can just charge on. Bo gets his deal signed. He comes into camp ready to rock. And Baldwin plays to his role as a 27th pick or 26th pick in the draft. This position has got to jump up. And I think there's a lot of pressure on Nick Sirianni to coach these guys. Love Nick. Nick's sharp, bright young guy. He's got a great future. But I think if we're talking about pressure on people, Don Terry Poe coming in and Matt Castle, I think this wide receiver core is one I'm going to watch very closely over the next 180 days because they have got to rock it this year.
Specific to the slot receiver position, one of the guys I left out that's still on the roster, Dexter McCluster. Remember, he was a slot when he first came in. Now he's a running back, and he's actually drawn Mitch. We have a few minutes left. Well,
here's the thing. Even with Breston, if Breston's on the outside, you can still play Dex in a slot, even play Wiley in another slot. Well, and now all of a sudden, you got some real problems for a defense.
That's what I'm getting at. Dexter's drawn a lot of attention here in our live chat room on just where does he stand on this roster with the addition of Cyrus Gray, with the addition of obviously Wiley, and he's kind of in there and as a third down back, as kind of a semi-slot receiver, and one of our Greg Lancet of our chat room even asked, is he the odd man out? And I said, well, he's not the odd man out. Dex is going to be on this roster, and he's going to play a role on this team. But what is that role? That's an interesting thing to talk about with Dexter and these additions. And let's assume for a minute that Wiley can be that slot guy. Let's say best case scenario for Wiley. He comes in and he shows he can contribute as a slot receiver. Where does that leave Dex in the whole thick of things with running back and possibly being a guy in the wide receiving core as well?
Well, some of the discussion is you only can have so many guys active on a Sunday. That rule hasn't been changed yet. And so that does come into play, and it might be something that's opponent specific. But I think Dex's role is interesting. I mean, this was the longest punt return in Chiefs history. But if Devon Wiley becomes a punt returner, then Dex may becomes the kick returner, and Javier can focus on being involved on the defense. I don't think this eliminates Dexter McCluster from any part of the package. I just think it makes it even more dangerous, and maybe makes him more dangerous because instead of being like the feature running back, which he had to be toward the end of last season, or he's got a target on his back with somebody trailing him around, and all of a sudden he becomes the guy who kind of gets lost to the opponent and can create some big plays. I think it's better if Dex is more stealth in this approach than maybe sitting there right in the middle of the screen.
And Gray will be an interesting player. We like what he can bring from special teams, Mitch. We like the all-around. But as you said, there's spots on how many spots you're going to have active. Gray could be one of those guys where, well, is he going to be active this week because he's going to play on special teams if all your other running backs are healthy, or is he going to be one of your inactive players? I would be surprised to see Dex fall into the inactive category because you're right. He's going to contribute on special teams as a return player, as a kick returner, even if Wiley becomes the punt return man. And schematically, there's just so many things you can do with a guy like McCluster. Look at what Brian Dable did with some of the weapons he had last year against the Chiefs. Charles Clay, who's kind of that, is he a fullback? Is he a tight end? Is he an H-back? What is he? And
he was all of it.
He was
against
all
us.
over the field against us. And Daboll's isn't one of those traditional type of offensive coordinator that's going to be, well, this is our 3 tight end set. Here we go. This is our I formation set. Here we go. He likes to move things around. He likes to get creative and draw things up. And McCluster can be a wild card, even if he's not a specific, he's your 3rd down back or he is your slot receiver. I think they're going to find plenty of use for McCluster next season.
You know, what's interesting about the McCluster-Wiley discussion, if you're going to talk about that, is they might be asked to do some other things that they haven't done to this point. Maybe Devon has, I don't know. I haven't talked to him. But they may have to be involved in some coverage. If they're both up, depending on the opponent, then somebody's going to have to be on kickoff coverage of that group. Maybe one of those 2 guys. And I know they're small, but if they're fast, they can get down there and still possibly make a play. So in the case of Dax, if he's not doing all the returns and he is sharing some of the slot duty based on scheme and the opponent, he might be asked to do some additional things in special teams that he has not had to do to this point.
Well, if either one of those guys do that, it also trickles down. Every roster move like it trickles down because then your traditional 5th receiver has been Terrence Copper or Jeremy Horn, who are your special teams guys. If Wiley's running on special teams, does that open up, lessen your amount of receivers you're going to keep, and you keep an extra lineman, or you keep an extra safety? It all kind of goes hand in hand. It's this big puzzle, especially when you get down to those reserve players, and it'll be interesting exactly how that puzzle comes into shape. We're going to see rookies on the field for the first time this weekend. Stay tuned to KCChiefs.com throughout rookie minicamp weekend. We'll have exclusive interviews as well as coverage, and hear from Romeo Cornell as the Chiefs rookies are in town for the first time. We'll see you next week. Remember, Thursday at noon, Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers.